Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
So I want to welcome you all to tonight's A Time for Truth show. We have a special show tonight, regarding a technology that's been applied in many different countries, especially down in Colombia, where a colonel actually applied it to change the whole country, called The Way to Happiness. Very simple, common sense guide to better living. When I was younger, I really never thought anything was necessary. I thought it was common sense. And I didn't realize a lot of what I had received as common sense came from my family, my upbringing. And I assumed that it was similar for everybody. And as life has gone on, I found out that that's not the case. And in the last year in our country, in 2020, we've seen the amount of turbulence, turmoil, and we look around, we say, why is that happening? And the reason it's happening is because there's not an agreement. Very simple thing, agreement. But, agreement is what causes a marriage either to stay together or to break up. Agreement is what causes a business partnership to stay together or to dissolve and go into attorney battles. So agreement actually is not such a simple thing, because if it was, there wouldn't be so much discourse and problem and conflict in life. So tonight, I'm going to present to you something that is actually very simple, but very powerful, and applied, it helps all of us. It's one thing I like about it is I'm a Jewish guy. My wife is a Catholic woman. I have friends who are Hindu, Buddhist, Protestant, Methodist, all different religions and different cultures, different creeds, different upbringing. And, what I like is something that all of us can apply, like water, like air, that we're not going to have any conflict or discussion about or debate, because we have enough of that in life already. So this common sense guide called The Way to Happiness was actually devised by a humanitarian who was a very talented man. His name was L. Ron Hubbard. And he was a musician, a navigator, playwright, investigated into the mind, sailed ships, charted the West Coast for the U.S. Army, was in intelligence in World War II. I don't know how the man ever slept. And he realized what was going on really globally. And so he made this guide, and it's been used all over the world. So the first thing we're going to do is show you a video, the introductory video about this way to happiness. And so the engineer will put the first video on, and here we go.
Happiness. True joy and happiness are valuable. If one does not survive, no joy and no happiness are obtainable. Trying to survive in a chaotic, dishonest, and generally immoral society is difficult. Any individual or group seeks to obtain from life what pleasure and freedom from pain that they can. Your own survival can be threatened by the bad actions of others around you. Your own happiness can be turned to tragedy and sorrow by the dishonesty and misconduct of others. I am sure you can think of instances of this actually happening. Such wrongs reduce one's survival and impair one's happiness. You are important to other people. You are listened to. You can influence others The happiness or unhappiness of others you could name is important to you. Without too much trouble, using this book, you can help them survive and lead happier lives. While no one can guarantee that anyone else can be happy, their chances of survival and happiness can be improved. And with theirs, yours will be. It is in your power to point the way to a less dangerous and happier life.
So there you go. Common sense, but very powerful. Because if you look at our last year, what were we missing? We were missing integrity. We were missing honesty. We were missing really a acknowledgement or an understanding of how much each one of us does for each other. If you really look at it, and sometimes I've done this when I fly into New York, and then you fly into New York and you go over all these boroughs and you see all these buildings and all these people. And I don't know if it's come across your mind, but I think when I'm up on the airplane, I go, my God, there's a guy down there who decided to be a fireman. And there's a lady who's running a pastry shop. And there's somebody else who's got, with some other people, a Chinese restaurant. And then there's somebody who decided to be a policeman and risk their life because he wanted to be a policeman. And some other person, whether it be male or female, doesn't really matter, is doing the garbage, the sanitation, being a doctor like me. It doesn't really matter what you do. You know, people say, well, you know, a prejudice and whatever. The truth of the matter is, if you really take stock, even the lights of this show, the internet that we have here to watch this, the phones that were made in a different country, it's really amazing how people, I guess you could call it mankind, we can make it smaller, the community, or your family. It's amazing how much we do for each other and we take for granted. And I think the big problem is not having that common sense guide, or realizing that, you know, you could have all the money in the world, but if you were all alone, aside from being lonely, you would probably die because there'd be no one to pack the grocery store with food for you. There'd be no one to plow the street. There'd be no one to make your electricity. And you'd be running around all the buildings that you own with nothing. So really, I think the greatest wealth that we have in this world is mankind, is people, each other. And that's why I think this program is so beautiful, because it was applied in Colombia, where it actually reduced the crime, reduced the kidnapping, improved the economy, so much so that the president of Colombia received a Nobel Peace Prize, and the country became one that was undesirable, to where all over the world people were now investing in Colombia. And if we look at what's happened in the United States in the last year, I think there's a lot of turmoil that's occurred. It would be very beneficial to use the program. It's very easy to obtain. And this organization called thewaytohappiness.org. And the books are in many different languages, so they can be applied in different cultures. And they're available free of charge. So you can find out for yourself and see how you like it. So I want to play you another video. And this one actually happens to be with the government. Because, you know, there's been a lot of turmoil. Am I a Democrat? Am I a Republican? I'm a liberal. I'm this, I'm that. And all this conflict. Again, all this conflict. So let's take a look at a chapter from this book and see what it says about a government and supporting the government, regardless of the political party that you have affiliation with. Here we go. Engineer, please.
10. Support a government designed and run for all the people. Unscrupulous and evil men and groups can usurp the power of government and use it to their own ends. Government organized and conducted solely for self-interested individuals and groups gives the society a short lifespan. This imperils the survival of everyone in the land. It even imperils those who attempt it. History is full of such governmental deaths. Opposition to such governments usually just brings on more violence. But one can raise his voice in caution when such abuses are abroad. And one need not actively support such a government. Doing nothing illegal, it is yet possible, by simply withdrawing one's cooperation, to bring about an eventual reform. Even as this is being written, there are several governments in the world that are failing only because their people express their silent disagreement by simply not cooperating. These governments are at risk. Any untimely wind of mischance could blow them over. On the other hand, where a government is obviously working hard for all its people, rather than for some special interest group or insane dictator, one should support it to the limit. There is a subject called government. In schools, they mostly teach civics, which is merely how the current organization is put together. The real subject, government, goes under various headings: political economy, political philosophy, political power, etc. The whole subject of government and how to govern can be quite precise, almost a technical science. If one is interested in having a better government, one that does not cause trouble, one should suggest it be taught at earlier ages in schools. One can also read up on it. It is not a very difficult subject if you look up the big words. It is, after all, the people and their own opinion leaders who sweat and fight and bleed for their country. A government cannot bleed. It cannot even smile. It is just an idea men have. It is the individual person who is alive. You. The way to happiness is hard to travel when shadowed with the oppression of tyranny. A benign government, designed and run for all the people, has been known to smooth the way. When such occurs, it deserves support.
Beautiful video. Every time I watch it, I get goosebumps. For me, myself, I was very lucky that we had this government in the United States of America, because I had to leave communism in Cuba as a little kid. And if it didn't exist, where would I have gone to? So to me, it's a form of paying back to our country and making sure that it survives. Because back then, where was I going to go to? And so what happened is, luckily, we were able to come here. I was able to get education. My family had to start over. Nothing was handed out. We had to work hard. My father had to start his profession over again from the beginning. So did my mother. But we had freedom, and we had independence and the ability to make our own decisions, which is very, very valuable. So luckily, I've been able to really do well. I have a family. We have kids. We have grandkids. I have friends. I have a profession. And if you really look at out, as you're watching this show, you really look at, we can all complain about what we have, but if you travel abroad and you think about, I'll give you a specific country, and I'm thinking about Haiti. And I've been to Haiti a few times in my efforts to do drug education. And it is horrific what's happening there and what's happening there right now, and the conditions of the Haitian people and what they'd have to live in. And when I came there and I flew there the first time, I thought to myself, how can it be that here we are in this great country, and only a few hundred miles away, people are suffering so much? Aren't they like me? What if I had grown up in Haiti? What if it was me who was there? And what if someone came to help me? And, I think a lot of times, if we were really to take a look which is one of the precepts of this book, is to try and treat other people as you would want them to treat you. If you really think about that, and if you apply it even in your business, when you give quotes for a job, and you give them the quote that you would want if you had the job, or you're looking for a partner in life, you're single, and you're trying to find a spouse or just a friend to go out with. And what are you looking for? You're looking for someone that's going to treat you with respect and honesty. It seems so simple, yet you see how many relationships end up not being that way. And the state of what's happened over the last year or so, where people wondering what's true, what's not true, who do you trust, who do you not trust. So the book is something that allows each individual to make their own decision. Because, you know, when you try to force your idea on others, or even tell other people why they should do something, I don't know if you've noticed it, but I have, it doesn't seem to work. It seems like we're all very self-determined human beings. We like to make our own choices. We want to know the facts. We kind of skeptical at times. We want to know if it's true, is it not true? And then once we have the facts, we want to look at it in our own space, our own time, make our own decisions, live our own lives. And if you really look at it, probably most of the people on the planet would want to do that all across the globe. So I would think it would be a good thing to preserve our country and our integrity in this country. And really, when you look at the precepts of how our country was founded, of, you know, a government of the people, a government for the people, a government by the people. And it's very interesting that our forefathers who fought in the middle of winter with no heat, with no shelter, probably with very little food. I don't even know how, to be honest with you, how they didn't get frostbite, because they didn't have the modern Gore gloves and the heating pads. And amazing what these men, Washington, you know, Jefferson, all these men who founded this country and what they went through. And I'm sure they got hit by bullets, and how they managed to survive, and the kind of medical treatment that was available back then. And somehow, because they were fighting for something with enough idealism, continued. And so this show, I thought I would bring this out, because if you really look at what they did for us and what we're leaving for our children, it looks like it's something that we can look at and say, well, you know what? It's not so hard for us to give a little bit more. So let's look at another chapter from this book on how we can achieve more agreement amongst all the different cultures, especially here in New York, where I live, with all the different nationalities. And to me, New York is like, you know, the World Series of cities. You have people who come to New York, and like Frank Sinatra said, when you make it here, you make it everywhere. It's up to us, New York, New York. So I don't think it's really being, you know, self-fulfilled or engrossed that New York is a place where most people want to live, and also because it's in the middle of the United States of America. So let's take a look at something that's very important, and that's respecting someone who is of goodwill. Goodwill meaning someone who's doing something for us. Could be a politician, could be an attorney, could be a mother, could be a grandmother, could be a doctor, could be a sanitation, could be your man who does your lawn and saves your tree, or your veterinarian. Let's take a look at this chapter.
11. Do not harm a person of goodwill. Traditionally, men of goodwill means those who mean well toward their fellows and work to help them. Despite the insistence of evil men that all men are evil, there are many good men around, and women too. You may have been fortunate enough to know some. Factually, the society runs on men and women of goodwill. Public workers, opinion leaders, those in the private sector who do their jobs, are in the great majority people of goodwill. If they weren't, they long since would have ceased to serve. Such people are easy to attack. Their very decency prevents them from overprotecting themselves. Yet, the survival of most of the individuals in a society depends upon them. The violent criminal, the propagandist, the sensation-seeking media, all tend to distract one's attention from the solid, everyday fact that the society would not run at all were it not for the individuals of goodwill. As they guard the street, counsel the children, take the temperatures, put out the fires, and speak good sense in quiet voices, one is apt to overlook the fact that people of goodwill are the ones that keep the world going and man alive upon this earth. Yet such can be attacked, and strong measures should be advocated and taken to defend them and keep them from harm. For your own survival and that of your family and friends depends upon them. The way to happiness is far more easily followed when one supports people of goodwill.
So there you go, a person of goodwill. If you look at it, most of us need to be acknowledged. So you know what? For me, I'm going to acknowledge all of you watching the video. You are people of goodwill. Why? Because when you get up in the morning, I would say that the majority of us go out and we do something. We provide something. And unfortunately, maybe it's not appreciated. Or in today's world, where all of it is like marketing and about, a new technique where you're going to make $80,000 from your computer while you see no one at all during the day. And great. So if we really look at it and we look at how much we have, if you just look at these phones that we have that allow us to compute, to communicate, to send messages, to have different communication programs out there that we all are on, and allow the world to really go at a much higher pace of life. But then we look at it and we say, well, is it really a good thing that a poor teenager, through that media, it gets utilized to ostracize that kid? Because maybe that kid ends up going on drugs because he feels so horrible because all his friends use that media to ostracize or belittle that kid. And if those other kids were to think about it, and maybe we as parents got them to look at how would you like it if that happened to you? Because too often that's the problem, is that it's never looked at in reverse. What would happen if that happened to you? It seems like if you really look at it and you have the war movies, and I'm maybe a typical guy and I love the action and whatever, but if you really look at it and you watch Braveheart and you really confront at how they cut each other up, how wonderful was that really? And why were they doing that when they didn't have refrigerators? They didn't have grocery stores. They didn't have any streets yet. Why weren't they cooperating instead of killing each other on the battlefield? It seems like maybe something was missing, because I can't believe that they actually just wanted to go out and do that unless there was something missing. And what's been missing probably is some form of concept of how valuable each one of us are to each other. And, sometimes with spouses, maybe we end up fighting with each other. And why? Because there's a misunderstanding. And why is the misunderstanding? Because we fail to listen to each other. And then you get done with the argument later on, and you really love each other, so you resolve it, and you say, well, why did all that happen? Why didn't I just acknowledge my spouse? Whether you're the wife and you acknowledge your husband, whether it's a husband acknowledging the wife, it has nothing to do with sex or or prejudice has to do with the fact of respecting the other person and really taking a look at how much we achieve. Sometimes we get going so fast that we totally forget what we have. We take it all for granted, and then we want more. And, I don't know who's not guilty of it. I'm not going to tell you that I'm not guilty of it. So, the thing that's so beautiful about the program is that, as I was telling you at the beginning of the show, it's been utilized in different countries, and it's actually caused tremendous changes, because what it does is, as the person reads the booklet, and it comes in little booklets, and you can get this on YouTube. There are public service announcements of the way to happiness, and you can also go on the actual site, and it has courses you can do for free, and it has videos you can watch, and you can actually utilize it also with a virtual classroom. And if you wanted to use it for your students, and you wanted to maybe in a Sunday school or in a sports program, the tools are available to you, because when you really think about it, with athletes, when we're mentoring them and they're younger, it would be good to instill this in them so they can, when they get into a higher level, have more stability. When they're being trained, and our youth are being trained to be engineers, or to go on into acting, or to go on to being health professionals, or legal professionals, how important is it really to have a foundation of morality, of integrity? Very important, because then we have a basic tenet where we trust each other and we're working on an agreement. And again, we go back on why this book was formulated. So let's take a look. And at this point, you may all want to kill me. I don't know. I was a little bit, wondering whether I should present this or not. And because sometimes it's a little difficult, but as a father and as a doctor in my office, I realized that, it's important sometimes, even though, you could get a little bit attacked or get someone upset. It's better to have something positive happen than just to never try to do anything and just let things keep getting worse. So if some of you may have said now, or thought that, who is this guy, or who knows, maybe somebody wanted to, thought about, enough already. Let's play this next one. It'll be a mystery. And I'm going to play this one without telling you what it's about. It's a little bit heavy, but what the heck? Let's play the next one.
8. Do not murder. Most races, from the most ancient times to the present, have prohibited murder and punished it heavily. Sometimes this has been broadened to say, "Thou shalt not kill," when a later translation of the same work has found it to read, "Thou shalt not murder." There is a considerable difference between these two words, kill and murder. A prohibition against all killing would rule out self-defense. It would tend to make it illegal to handle a serpent coiling to strike the baby. It would put a race on a diet of vegetables. I am sure you can see many illustrations of the difficulties raised by a prohibition against all killing. Murder is another thing entirely. By definition, it means the unlawful killing of one or more human being by another, especially with malice aforethought. One can easily see that in this age of violent weaponry, murder would be all too easy. One could not exist in a society where oneself or one's family or friends were at the mercy of some who went about casually taking lives. Murder justly bears the highest priority in social prevention and retaliation. the stupid, the evil, and the insane seek to solve their real or imagined problems with murder, and they have been known to do it for no reason at all. Get behind any demonstratedly effective program that handles this threat to mankind and push. Your own survival could depend upon it. The way to happiness does not include murdering, or your friends, your family, or yourself being murdered.
So you may say, well, gosh, Dr. Fialkoff, why didn't you start out with this one, the heavy duty one, and end up with a nicer one at the end? And my answer to that would be, life is what it is. And I think it's more important that we can change. And I always love the end of the Rocky movie when he's fighting Drago, the Russian guy in Russia. And he really wants to avenge Apollo's death. And he finally wins. And it's only a movie, but it's got a great theme and great message. And at the end, he goes, you know, I saw a lot of people in here didn't like him too, Bunny B. Didn't like me. I didn't like you as much too. But since people's been changing and I's changed, and I've seen you's change too. We can all change. And you see they all get up and they're all clapping and going crazy at the end. And even the commissar gets up, and because he's pressured by the others, which is what the book does. You know, it creates common agreement, and it pressures those of us who maybe should appreciate more. And he even got up. And the theme of that movie was change. And, you know, I know how many of you watch and like Rocky, but, you know, I like that simple theme of his, change, that we can all change. And what this book does is it allows us to change. And it's a very real book. And the message I wanted to leave you with is that when you're out there watching the show today, is pick up a copy and start reading it. What ends up happening is it ends up dispelling things that were told to you that you never really agreed with. And it tends to also bring in and says, you know, I used to believe that. Why did I go away from it? Or, you know what, I always thought that was the right thing, but I thought I was old-fashioned. And it's very interesting because it does stabilize you, just like it stabilized the country of Colombia. So I hope you found this beneficial. If you're out there and you're having problems as a couple, pick up a copy, each one of you, and read it and see if you can apply some of the precepts to your relationship. If you're a sports coaching kids and you're trying to figure out how you're going to get these guys who are really good athletes, but they just won't coordinate, give them a copy of the book. If you yourself are trying to find a new vocation or frustrated with your job, get a copy of the book. And I wish you a good future. I hope it changes things for you. I hope you've enjoyed the show and this episode of A Time for Truth. And we will have more episodes coming up in the next few weeks. And I wish you a very happy week coming up. And the spring really comes back. It kind of came, and then the cold came back in. But now we appreciate the spring even more. So have a very good night. And I'll see you next time.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet